Welcome, Paula Milne. It's a great honor to have you here, a British multi-award-winning writer. You've obviously written multiple shows and films, but how would you describe the fascination of writing for you?
Well, I think I have an advantage because I didn't go to university and because I left school at 15. So I never wanted to be a writer. I never had any aspirations. I thought you had to have a university degree and have studied English and Jane Austen and so forth. But for reasons of my background, my father left home when myself and my siblings were very young. And my uncle helped bring us up. And he was a film critic. And he was starting a magazine in the UK called Movie. And he was developing the auteur theory as applied to the American cinema as against the new wave French cinema. So as children, other kids were taken to a playground and we were taken to the movies. And the combination of that and being a painter, because screenwriting is essentially a visual method of writing, the vocabulary is visual, I think they coalesced and became very helpful.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Can you spare some insight how you would start creating a story? Or
Well, storytelling is hugely about structure. Obviously, it's about characters and what happens to them, but how you structure the story is essential in holding and compelling an audience. And the ritual I have is when I was at art college, we would get huge pieces of paper from newsprint before they print it on the newspapers. So now I get the biggest piece of paper, imperial size, huge, and I will randomly write a plot point and put a line around it. So in the end, it is covered with these bubbles with handwritten thoughts. And then I will start to number them. You know, this is scene 1, this is scene 3, and so forth, you know. And then I will do another piece of paper and put them vertically. And if that works, and I think that's going to be okay structurally, then I'll start to make it on a piece of paper handwriting as a kind of rough treatment for myself. I handwrite maybe for like 3 days.
okay,
And then put it on, we have the software called Final Draft, and put it on the computer. And that moment, when you decide it's ready to go on the computer, because this sounds a little self-indulgent and arguably pretentious, but the moment you put it on the computer, it starts to look like the final script. Yeah. So you are finessing the final product, and it ceases to some extent to be the work in progress, you know, because I believe that when you write a scene, you have to say to yourself, have I seen this scene before? Can it be better? Is it truthful? Is it carrying the plot? Every scene should serve at least 2 to 3 masters: character, plot, and theme.
it seems like politics and also divided families, what we find in The Same Sky too, is something that interests you. I have to say it's hugely appealing to an audience.
Yes,
too,
that's the main thing.
Yeah.
It has to always come back to how you reach an audience. And perhaps it's because I'm a woman writer, but I've always tried to use, particularly writing about politics, which I haven't done exclusively, but a lot, to find a kind of emotional prism through which to examine some of these issues. When you think of the Berlin Wall, you think of divided families. And so if we can have a family divided, then we have this beating heart, because all of the audience, whether in Germany or anywhere else, have been part of a family, or wish they were part of a family, or wish they were part of another family and not the one they had. But that is their big common denominator. And so when the opportunity came up to write something about the wall and The Same Sky, and they said we're interested in the early 70s, I thought I have something to bring to the table here.
And if we jump further in it, we have a story about a Romeo agent here. We have a story about a child athlete in the East. We have the Romeo agent is in the West, obviously.
Yeah.
And we do have a gay teacher in the East. How did it come that you took on these perspectives?
I wanted to connect these various characters. I was interested in the child athlete and the pressures that can put on a family, the opportunities that a family would get if their kid got into the Olympics, and how important that was to East Germany at the time as an emerging, wanted to emerge on the world stage. But the Romeo thing is obviously a fantastic notion to write about.
It is, yeah.
The gay story, when I was researching generally, looking into it, the gay story, I was interested to discover that the homosexual law, decriminalizing it, was in East Germany before West Germany.
Oh.
So I thought, well, that's very interesting. So if I wanted to do a gay, then I thought, well, I don't want him to leave East Germany just because he's gay. That's kind of a trope, you know? And one of my sons, I have several children, and one of my sons is a teacher, he's a physics teacher. And when he talks about how he tries to reach the kids and how he does demonstrations, you know, of physics, which I have known nothing about, and the passion, I thought this is the trick. So if this teacher cannot teach because he's being dictated what he can teach, and it is that makes him want to leave, then that is a really and so it's not incidentally he's gay at all, because he's slightly outside of society, even though it's decriminalized. But the main thing is to have the freedom to be the full person he wants to be, and that's things like that are hugely appealing, because the politics that he was up against, as well as his sexuality, were really intriguing to write.
Yeah. So this is and become an international series.
Yeah.
How is it for you as a writer? Like, what kind of what do you do to make this an international series, if you want to call this? How do you try to accomplish this?
Well, I think the danger is to think like that in some ways, to think sort of globally, and will they like this in Italy, and will this go down in South America? So, for example, in The Same Sky, it was very important for me to come and do a lot of research, to really get my head into what was happening at the time. And then equally, Oliver Hirschbergel directing it was absolutely, you know, a stickler for authenticity, and really, really wanted to make it, you know, as far as, you have to take certain liberties in order to do the drama, but as far as he could, to create the mise en scene of the time that was true and authentic.
Yeah.
So that it felt true to the people who'd experienced it and witnessed it at the time.
And you also have been through the process of different languages in one show, and now back to The Same Sky, which is a show that has like German dialogue in it, a lot of German dialogue in it. It sounds like it must be interesting for a writer to...
Well, it was a process. When I was first approached, the idea was that it would be an English-speaking show about Germany at a certain time, Berlin at a certain time. And that was the idea. And when I was like halfway through writing the 6 episodes, it became clear, I think ZDF had picked it up, that it would become a German-speaking show. So part of you was kind of, really? Great. What's going to happen to my dialogue and so forth, you know? But then when Oliver came on, and indeed as the producer yourself, the trust in the text, so the interpretation, the translation, was as close as possible to what I had in mind. And I think that the fact it still retains the power and the narrative impulse that it does, and the feeling about the characters, is because structurally, and all the things I was talking about before, were in place. So in a sense, yes, they speak German to each other, but what they're saying and how they feel is part of this common humanity thing I banged on about.
I want to end with one quote, because I read that you are called Britain's most accomplished female writer, and I wanted to ask you what you respond to that.
That's very nice. I would prefer just Britain, an accomplished writer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure.